there are many hundreds, in fact, applications that do use AI. And if you don't track them, then you start to have like almost a shrapnel in your business of little bits of applications that are at some point in their life cycle. Are they brand new and being adopted? Are they well established and driving value? Are they mature? Are they free and embedded?
Welcome to the first series of the Off Menu IT podcast. I am your host, Sean Ashbury, and in this episode, we are focused on Calero's SaaS management solution, which is one of 9 episodes that you can enjoy this season. This episode was recorded on November 15th, and some of the proposed announcements may have already been released. Our guest is Giulio D'Ali, who is a Senior Vice President of SaaS Management at Calero. Giulio began his career in software engineering, growing into architecture and research and development. He is now a product-focused technologist who drives customer value, products innovation, and modernization as the Senior Vice President of SaaS Management within Calero. The podcast is fully independent and does not accept payments from its guests. The mission is to help the ITAM community make better decisions through their own discovery. Let this maximize your IT budget and improve your RFP process. So, who is Calero and what is your product and service?
Yeah, so Calero provides technology lifecycle management effectively with a keen focus on expenses and cost optimization within technology. And when we say technology, it's quite a few disciplines, SaaS being the key focus at the moment, but also large parts of the business run on mobility or telecoms, also financial services. So there's different areas of technology, but effectively we're looking at the management, control, visibility, ultimately to bring our customers, cost reduction in those systems.
What drew you to SaaS management?
So slightly conventionally through the fintech part of the business, actually, sort of 20 odd years ago. And fintech, just so we're all clear, is effectively like expensive SaaS, right? It's niche within the financial services or hedge funds, anyone that trades. And it's just, orders of magnitude more expensive at the unit level and slightly lower in terms of the population that consumes it. But the notions are the same. Complex subscription with a contract, with consumption, with users and licenses and renewals, audits, all those things that make up software and SaaS. And so we started there, and then as our customers demanded more, then we sort of moved into the wider SaaS space from there.
And so, now you mentioned there, of course, from fintech, but where did your idea for the products begin? I mean, what inspired the creation of Calero and SaaS management?
Yes, ironically, actually, the idea, despite the experience coming from fintech, the idea actually came from the telecoms side, where in the telecoms world, it's moving slightly off the traditional telephony and more to what we call UCaaS. So it's like Teams, WebEx, RingCentral, all of those platforms that have a strong telephony element, but also a strong SaaS element. So it's a license allocated to someone with certain features and plans and prices. And those two worlds basically collide. So it collides the software world along with the telecoms world, and that's where they meet. And in that meeting, we built what was initially just for UCaaS management, but it very quickly spiraled into the full SaaS when, you're looking at Teams, which is Microsoft. So therefore now you're now seeing the full 365 estate. And then, well, why not also look at Adobe and Salesforce? And it just spiraled out of there. So, to be honest, it was all entirely customer driven. So there's an element of intent with certainly COVID, I think, drove that, where the adoption exploded and the customers were like, oh my God, what do we do? And I'd like to say the current intent is really through AI, because it's like a second wave of explosion that we're seeing. But effectively, it's that customer-driven mantra that's always, made Calero what Calero is, right? We're there to solve customer technology needs.
It's interesting. A lot of people seem to be kind of early adopting it and just testing it, but you're actually seeing demand for Calero's SaaS management platform to try and focus on the AI.
Yeah, so AI comes in like there's many guises, but there's two broad brush guises, right? There's like the infrastructure as a service, so you're using it as a raw platform, and you're integrating it into applications, probably consuming tokens. And then there's the slightly more SaaS angle where, as a vendor, you're selling something, and there's the add-on SaaS module. add-on rather AI module. So take Microsoft as probably the one that many people are familiar with. You've bought the Microsoft suite and they're trying to now, as part of your enterprise renewal, upsell to you Copilot. And the question arises, okay, well, we can see the cost and we can maybe speculate on the benefit. But what we don't actually know is the true adoption and the true demand and the true business use case behind that. So there's a lot of, I would say, speculative buying happening at the moment and experimentation, right? So people want to see, will this thing actually help the business? And take Copilot aside as a well-known brand of a product that is being resold. There are several, many hundreds, in fact, applications that do use AI. And if you don't track them, then you start to have like almost a shrapnel in your business of little bits of applications that are at some point in their life cycle. Are they brand new and being adopted? Are they well established and driving value? Are they mature? Are they free and embedded? So they're all at different points of their life cycle. And so that's driving some of the demand for our visibility and management so that people get an idea of what is useful, what is not useful within our business, which is fundamentally a people problem, actually. It's less so technology. So technology is there to help us track and obviously give benefits, but it's that human interaction driven by the Calero platform that helps us uncover the true business benefit. Like, do we actually need this? Do we need to consolidate? Which ones are working? Which ones are not working?
Brilliant. That's great. Great to hear that. And obviously, I'm sure the listeners would be quite interested to see how that works in their environments. It's funny that you mentioned earlier how it's kind of completely by accident. I mean, most ITAMers will relate to that because most of them fell into ITAM by accident. So what was your first breakthrough success after that kind of accidental realization that it was worthwhile platform to focus on?
I think it's really dealing with Microsoft within the UCaaS space. So obviously we're focused on Teams, but we very quickly start to see the Microsoft licensing and are you using desktop products or you're not using desktop products? Do you have the mobility, enterprise mobility security plan, or you've got device-based licenses or not? And so it starts to, explode in there. And when our customers saw the depth that we could go in quite rapidly, then that's where they saw value. And then when we said, well, how do we go beyond Microsoft? We actually pivoted rather than to a particular vendor, we pivoted to Discovery. And it's with Discovery, which is effectively connecting to incumbent systems, is our approach. So it's an agentless approach. And it's that Discovery, but that it sort of shines a light on the problem of SaaS. Because the problem of SaaS is effectively an event-based problem. Well, we like to think about it as an event-based problem because it's unlike an asset. An asset is something that you find somewhere physically present and you can inspect, measure, and maybe quantify, what version it is, things like that. Whereas SaaS is more of an event-based problem. It's like someone logs onto a URL or someone actually launched a program and that's consumed a token, or someone has expensed something, as a new, self-service purchase item. And so when we do discovery through all those angles, and there's many of these angles, then you start to understand like the beating heart of software, or shadow IT, as often people call it, right? Shadow IT coming into the business and seeing it be surfaced, right? And then be documented and tracked and monitored from there. And the beauty of looking at events is that it actually drives two things. It drives discovery. So do I know that this thing even exists? But it also drives usage and usage patterns, because the vendors, they're quite savvy. They don't always want to tell you everything about the usage and the behaviors, because almost the more opaque they are with that, then the less you know whether you should or shouldn't renew and how to renew or what levels to renew. Whereas we marry that in, right? And so we give you not just the discovery that this exists, but some insights into the usage patterns rather. So it's not just you last used it here, but this is the patterns. Like you log in once a month, and that can be very telling, right? Because it can tell us that because you only log in once a month, then perhaps you don't actually need access to the platform. Maybe you just need a report extract, and that would suffice your once a month interaction with the platform. So tracking that usage does help.
So with Calero, obviously, you're shining a light on the problem. You're also providing insight in terms of the patterns, providing an opportunity for them to talk to someone to stop them doing it. But do you yourself also provide a consulting service, kind of a management of people's environments, where you have men on the ground, men or women on the ground providing that service?
Yeah, so there's elements of management we do provide, but I can best describe it as like host and load. So it's like we're taking away, let's call it, unnecessary potential manual labor that might be involved in, let's say, engaging with end users. So we'd use our platform to set up a user engagement, harvest out the questionnaires, feedback the responses to understand user adoption engagement, see where SaaS is going. Sometimes the people that we talk to, they don't have the time to do those things, right? So we'll all take that on their behalf. But we don't provide anything deeper from the service side. We partner with service providers for niche particular, SaaS specific, or also not SaaS specific, vendor specific is the word I'm looking for, vendor specific insights.
So how has the firm grown since in terms of client base, kind of reputation in the market?
Well, so Calero as a business has been around over 25 years, and our bread and butter is really the enterprise market, sort of Fortune 500 type customers, because effectively from the space that we came from, both in telecoms and fintech, and that's where the business is, right? Now, as we have grown over the years through mobility and UCaaS and now SaaS, then it's broadened, I guess, the appeal and the validity to like the mid-market segment. So that's probably our strongest, our strongest driver over the last 5+ years now. So the growth there is really where it's at, and also as we move more into the SaaS management, which is what the product is providing, right? It's not just a financial tool; it's a complete management ecosystem with automations and discovery in there. Then it kind of lends itself a little bit more to those more rapid customers that have nothing, right? And they need help in some sort of tooling, whereas the enterprise customers typically have some sort of maybe back office or ITSM platform that's sort of doing the role, but maybe not entirely focused on the depths and the necessities of SaaS.
And so what is the core focus of your SaaS management platform, and I guess also the wider business? How does SaaS management in Calero compare to the other more established units?
And so we offer all of our things effectively as modules on a singular platform. And some of our customers buy all the modules, right? Some of them typically buy one, and then we expand from there, if they're interested in the other modules. The thing that we're finding with SaaS is that the time to value is incredibly rapid. And so the time to value with telecoms is best in class for the industry, without a doubt. We have well-honed processes for how to get data in and how to even do some automatic ordering on the telecoms and mobility side. But the beauty of SaaS is it's just naturally more technology and API enabled. So the time to value that we can drive there is usually substantially faster. And so it's actually moving to the point where people would probably start with SaaS because they can see things very quickly and then say, oh, okay, you've done such a great job. Now, can you look at the other areas? And that's, I guess, pertinent to the newer customer base, to the established base. It's actually the other way around.
And so you mentioned it's agentless. So how does a company, if they were to want to trial Calero, do you have examples of a win, a success story in terms of when this trial has quite literally shown cost savings in a certain amount of time, an X amount of millions or thousands or whatever?
Yeah, so we typically look at two things. One is value and one is ROI. And so in terms of value, the biggest thing is really around that visibility and discovery. And so yes, it's agentless, which means so we're not clearly deploying agents. That's literally the whole point of it, right? But what we can do is connect to many different sources, be they expense platforms or endpoint security, SSO, etc. And in terms of value, that visibility is quite an eye-opener. We often hear customers think we've got, say, 40 odd SaaS apps or, whatever their number is. But it's pretty common that we find that, in the hundreds, 100, 125 type of apps, especially if they're a more like nimble, agile type startup business, or if it's a business that's gone through lots of mergers and acquisitions. In fact, there's a recent one where they thought they'd eradicated, I think it was NordVPN for them in their example. And we found through discovery, so we connected to many different systems because they're mergers and acquisitions, right? So hadn't yet consolidated all their platforms, which isn't a problem, right? We just have to connect to more things, and it's a few clicks rather than one click is 5 clicks. So it's not really a problem. But what it does do is it aggregates that data together, so you can now have that visibility. So, okay, these things that we thought we got rid of, we haven't got rid of. And these things that are deployed are actually double deployed in duplicate. So that's probably the biggest value that they get pretty much off the bat, like within 5 days or less of engagement. It's usually quite quick. In terms of ROI, every customer is different, right? And it depends on whether they have active projects, active vendors in focus. But we have seen ones where, we've delivered like 150% ROI within the first 3 months. And so the product's already paid for itself, and they're good to go. And so that obviously helps not only the business case, but really the further adoption, because that's what we drive for. So our platform is a all-you-can-eat platform, right? It's based on sort of documented users. So once the user is documented, throw all the SaaS that you want in there, and you're just extracting more value out of the platform.
Brilliant. And you mentioned mergers and acquisitions. Is that typically where you're seeing most of your traction in terms of the market?
We're certainly seeing a lot there. It's one of our key targets is a business that has been through mergers and acquisitions, because they're usually struggling. And also, it's not just that they're struggling to get visibility, but they don't necessarily yet have a grip of all the IT. Like some of them are like fresh off the M&A train, and they've just done relative introductions either side of the business. And so they haven't gone through any kind of consolidation yet. So the fact that we can come in with an agentless approach and effectively connect to all the incumbent parts that are in the relevant silos gives them that immediate visibility to really do a project plan, right? It helps them run as a business way beyond any cost savings and all the other benefits, which actually shift way down in their priority list. It's really getting that control over what does the greater estate look like now.
So you have kind of touched on it, but how, just between 1 and 5 clicks, but how do you tailor your product and services to meet the varied requirements because obviously you mentioned every single situation or every single environment is different.
Yeah, so there's a configurable like engine-based approach that we go for with templated or default configurations that come out of the box. So those default configurations have things like onboarding and offboarding. Like this is what we believe is our best-in-class onboarding and offboarding flow, which is nothing more than a culmination of all the experience across different customers, right? As we see more things, we see which bits work the best in terms of not just a deployment, but like an end user adoption and engagement throughout the business. And so there's things like those workflows that I mentioned. There's policies on finding SaaS optimizations. There's basic things like custom fields if they want to track fields, and dashboard reports that they can clone and then edit to their heart's content. That's actually probably one of the most popular parts of the platform. So we drive our dashboard reporting on Power BI technology embedded, and obviously there's a great familiarity for our customers that when they see that, they say, okay, I've only just seen Calero, but I already understand how I would edit and create my own analytics because I understand Power BI. So that's always a great thing. So there's lots of angles in terms of configuration and customization that are self-service to the customers.
Fantastic. You have that familiarity with the dashboard and the Power BI. What does your solution do the best, or what does your solution do well?
Well, so the customer wow, like day one, is the discovery element that I mentioned. But I think the differentiator is that our heritage has always been like the cost and expense focus that then drives a bunch of other things. And because of that, we're then looking at everything from procure to pay. And we're not just looking at it from a installed asset inventory. Now, everything comes out of the installed asset inventory. Like, that's the beating heart, is the inventory, without a doubt. But when you look at the rest of it, then you're really looking at, well, how did this come in? Who approved the PO? How did the invoices come in, and what's the chargeback and showback and allocation of that? And that's often an eye opener for people that haven't necessarily looked at that. It's basically similar to the FinOps mindset, funnily enough, right? Where they're really trying to look at these unpredictable, burst-driven costs, and how do we allocate those back to the right business units, right? They could be departments, they could be products. It depends how they run as a business. Could be projects, but basically the bit that is responsible for incurring that cost and giving them back visibility and accountability of that, right? So it's not, we very much drive a full business view of your SaaS estate so that everybody can understand their costs of running their parts of their business, rather than almost a back office, IT controlled domain, because SaaS isn't like that, right? SaaS is naturally driven to what we refer to as portfolio owners. So if you think of sales, they own the sales portfolio, so they've probably got Salesloft and Salesforce and a bunch of other things like Gong, etc. That engineering and marketing probably don't care about, but they own the key to that portfolio. And similarly for engineering, and then other departments, they have their own portfolios. So that's how we drive it, really, and that's how we almost culturally push it forward. That the more visibility and engagement the business gets, the better, right? Don't keep this as a back office thing. Use the end user engagement, bring everybody in, and also buy stuff. Ironically, it's not just about cost saving. It's about enabling the business to be more efficient, and often not, it's adopting something new because it will make me more efficient.
So I know you mentioned that you obviously do have people who can advise within the business. I mean, based off the SaaS vendors, are there any specific vendors that you'd say you're above, or rather most experienced in or most comfortable in providing the SaaS management platform for?
So the SaaS management platform and the engine is obviously multi-vendor. So we have policies that are, some of them are generic, like the user has left for get rid of their SaaS. It's quite an easy one. Others are very niche to say just Microsoft. Look at their enterprise mobility security add-on. Is that needed, or is it being used? Why are you paying for that add-on? Say for Power BI Visio. So those start to get quite niche. Or maybe Adobe's another one. With packaging and repackaging with Adobe. But in terms of our expertise, it probably is the larger vendors, like the Salesforces, Microsoft, Adobe's, etc. The depth from the longer tail gets shallower only because there's so many new vendors popping up all the time, and that's the nature of SaaS. And there's another critical reason for discovery is, like, you can't. It's not like asset-based software, right? Where you intentionally need to put something somewhere. Someone can easily sign up for Trello board, and that's it. You're now a Trello customer, and you didn't know that yesterday, and you weren't in control of that.
If you're enjoying listening to this episode, please show your support and take this short break to like and subscribe to the series and beyond. One more thing, if you know someone who could benefit from this episode, share the love and share this episode. Thank you. Is your solution unique in the market?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly like to believe so. I think beyond the discovery and end user engagement we talked about, we're certainly providing you the richest view when it comes to that UCaaS element, which is a strong element of consumption on top of your SaaS. So we have to think about SaaS is fundamentally moving or transitioning to a consumption-based problem, and it's not just licenses within or allocated rather to individuals. UCaaS was probably the starter of this, and maybe some storage-based services like Box as an example. But with UCaaS and the calls and call plans, that's a substantial, like almost 50% of your costs are probably the calls and the call plans on top of the seat that you've got. So if you're ignoring that in a solution that doesn't really understand that, then you're missing out on savings. And then the other thing is, as we move that same consumption model, right? What is going on top of the license is happening now more in SaaS. And in fact, Salesforce have recently talked about, well, how are we going to charge for Salesforce going forward? if we think about the agents and the AI agents that they're deploying, naturally mean that they have less seat-based licenses to sell, right? Because the whole point of an agent is that it can now do the work of 10, human agents that were before licensed. And so even Salesforce are now talking about, well, maybe we talk about it as value delivered. And value delivered is different for everybody, but it boils down to consumption. So it's responses replied, tickets handled, some sort of metric-based volume conversation. And it's that consumption that goes on top of your base fee is really where we're focusing at the moment.
What's, in your opinion, what's the biggest challenge that the industry is facing today in terms of your consumers and your customers?
Well, it's certainly the visibility that we've touched on. I would probably also touch on security, and it kind of links back to the AI, but it's people are interacting with SaaS, and the nature of AI is that you're giving it data, right? You're giving it data to do some benefit to the business. What data are you giving it? All right, and is that data okay to be sharing with that AI model? And how widespread and deep has it gone for you as an individual? Like how literally the number of documents you've shared, but also how broad it's gone across the organization in terms of departments and other personas now building into that model. And so the point of this discovering visibility is really from a security angle as well, is to give you that insights to say, hey, look, these are things that are known to be AI apps, even Zoom, for example, where it can record stuff. And it is giving you awareness that this is there, right, for then further inspection.
ITAM is listening to this. I mean, having a lot of them are given the SaaS management as part of their remit, thankfully. But security is always that they should be talking to security, and security should be talking to them, because, of course, the data that they can provide allows them to highlight both sides of the story. That there potentially is an issue here. Some discoverability and being able to manage that's absolutely fantastic. So I'm sure ITAMers would be grateful to have a tool like this. So how is Calero addressing the issue of security and discoverability? Stories encouraged if possible.
Yeah, so it's predominantly that visibility element, like knowing that you've got something, but knowing that you've got something is quite shallow, I guess, if it's just a name. So, especially if it's a brand name you've never heard of before and you've no idea. So what we do with our catalog is try to enrich it with just some extra data points to say this is known to have SOC compliance or ISO compliance or any other compliance artifacts. And one of them is, is it known to consume AI models? And so that is probably an area that is fairly young within our business, right? But it's something that is expanding in terms of demand. The other thing is just going back to the discovery, which is you asked for a war story. It's not quite a war story, but it's a surprising aha moment that appears all the time. Is how we don't just discover SaaS that you didn't know that you had, but subscriptions that are duplicate to the thing that you thought you had. And the classic example is often Adobe and similar type products where you're paying for your corporate enterprise plan, and Sean, for argument's sake, didn't know that, and so went and bought their own Acrobat Pro license to do whatever job Sean needed to do. But now you've got two subscriptions. You've got the enterprise one, and you've got Sean's, pay-as-you-go personal subscription. And so when we think about visibility, it's also shining a light on those, rogue buys that are happening in the organization, and then be able to co-term them or bring them into the enterprise agreement.
And when there are duplicates, how does it look, and how does it notify whoever is doing it or whoever's managing it?
Yes, so there's two elements of our product. There's what we call managed software and unmanaged. So unmanaged are new things that you've discovered and you need to inspect. So that's highlighted quite explicitly, like go and have a look at this newly discovered stuff. So that's in the case of net new. In the case of new, but you're already managing it, so going back to the Adobe example, then it does get flagged up actually on the individual vendor that a new expense, effectively a new expense, which is a subscription, has been found. It's allocated to this user because that's where the expense file came from, and then you can use the end user engagement to enrich that and discover why is it there? Is there a particular reason? Can you confirm? That's where you drive in the workflows and the business process off the back of that. Yeah. So it's highlighting in both shapes of the problem.
Fantastic. So plenty of experiences you've already mentioned here, but I mean, over the last few years, what have you learned from the last few years from your journey of Calero?
Yeah, one of the big learnings was that APIs aren't the answer to everything. And we maybe naively thought that, oh, with all these vendors, we'll just API connect and that's it's got everything. Yeah, off we go. Brilliant. And don't get me wrong, a lot of vendors do have APIs, but I guess the depth and the breadth across the vendor landscape is incredibly variable. And so we pride ourselves in the fact that we go beyond APIs, right? So we harvest usage from non-vendors based sources, so it's like the endpoint security and expenses and SSO, etc. But we also look at the invoices, because again, that's another way of identifying things, or the actual, automation against the portals. So the portals typically, even though they're human designed endpoints, they'll definitely have the data if the API isn't choosing to expose them. And the other tricky part with APIs is quite a few of them are actually paywalled, which is slightly annoying. So Concur is a good example. It's great to look at expenses, but the customer has to then pay for the Concur API module. That's not a Calero fee, just to be clear. That's on the vendor side. But for some of them, if they haven't already got that, then they might not want to pay that. And so we'll look at the portal and go that way.
Interesting how you mentioned invoices. I presume that from Calero's function of being a fintech, that invoices was highlighted. Hey, maybe you should look at that. And was that kind of the inspiration from it?
It's really on the telecom side, actually. So the telecoms business is predominantly about the invoicing and the invoicing process, making sure things are not just really paying the right thing, but actually are being paid, right? Because there's a business continuity concern here, that if things aren't being paid on time, then you've got termination risks and lack of service. So as a business, we do actually take invoicing incredibly seriously for obviously payment and continuity, but also chargeback and showback to the business. These invoice line items go elsewhere. And so we've got a whole engine and process around invoice collection, invoice and analysis and ingestion, and turning it into electronically readable concepts, right? And there's a whole bunch of technology there that drives what we used to just drive the telecom business, now drives all the bits of the business, right? It's a shared platform. But yes, that is a key element for us. And it's a key thing that when we think about SaaS management, it's not just about the inventory, it's about that full procure to pay experience.
Fantastic that collaboration has happened, and obviously it inspired to improve your tool. So looking back at Calero's journey, what would you have done differently, if anything?
I think all things that we probably would have done sooner is that obviously we were very focused on our customer base, right? So that's really like the telecom, mobility, and fintech group that are almost venturing out into what is for them sometimes a new world. For a lot of them, they're already covering that world, and so we're an extra tool in their arsenal. But for some of them, it's a new concept, very new concept. So I think the thing I probably would have done sooner rather than later is actually interact with the ITAM space that is obviously dedicated to this space, right? Because we've come at it from quite a different, almost non-traditional angle. But I think probably would have come to the ITAM space earlier, rather than almost procurement and finance is really, and a little bit of IT as well, but most procurement and finance is what drives the rest of the business in terms of persona. Whereas this is much closer to IT.
Brilliant. Well, I'm sure the listeners obviously hearing this, and hopefully the whole point of this podcast is to provide the alternative solutions that are not as well known. So hopefully you'll be receiving a few more calls in the ITAM space. And so, as far as the biggest hurdles that you've had to overcome,
our customers are very demanding in terms of like accreditation and security posture. So things like pen tests, SOC compliance, ISO compliance. We're even exploring if FedRAMP is one of the another ones that we want to add to the tool belt, and all of those things are incredibly onerous and time consuming. So that to be aware of, really. To service the larger customers, then that credibility and being able to let them trust you as a vendor, right, to hand over the data, which is, can be quite sensitive in terms of who's got what and what they're doing. I think is an important one, right? It's important to be able to attest to that accreditation, and some of it isn't even just the accreditation. To be honest, it's it's like the testimonials and the case studies, because they want to hear from their peers and that maybe have similar security concerns. The banks are especially keen on these things.
So, Calero yourself, I'm sure, constantly trying to evolve. But what can we expect from Calero next in the market?
Well, the shift is definitely to, as I mentioned earlier, to this consumption-based pricing. So it's really, I think that's where we're looking more now, is understanding the variance of what that actually looks like. I think when we look at consumption-based pricing in telecoms, even though all the vendors are different, the units of measures and the shapes and the mechanics are very repeatable and understood. Not so much so in and so far. Sometimes it's tokens, sometimes it's a measure of response rates, sometimes it could be execution speed. And so it's getting to grips with what are those measures within the SaaS space that we're looking at.
We're coming to the end of the podcast, and it wouldn't be the off menu without having a takeaway that we can provide the listeners, although I've already noted a few, so thank you very much for being a good sharer. But do you have a takeaway, a hack or trick that you'd be prepared to share with the listeners?
Yeah, I think the main one, at least that we see as customer driven, at least for want of a better word, is not to underestimate the power of end user engagement, across the business. And that doesn't mean that you have to do lots of legwork, right? It's having a platform that can drive that. But SaaS is fundamentally a problem that goes across many personas, many people, all doing adoption, all doing usage. And so if you try to almost run it as a back office thing without that end user engagement and regular end user engagement, then it does get tricky to solve that problem, especially with SaaS being viral, right? Someone adopts something and it's a collaborative board, and now 50 people are on that same thing. And so you need to understand why, how, what's the business value, what's the trajectory? Is this going to displace something that we've got? And that's where the end user engagement helps, right? It paints this picture as to what does this mean for us as a business, and it helps you make both financial decisions, but almost cultural decisions, right? We're gonna move off this and move on to that, and work better because of that move.
Fantastic. And what's your actual favourite takeaway in terms of it's Friday's time of recording? So what's the D'Ali household having tonight?
It's only not a takeaway because we go out to eat, but yes, curry and Indian food is a firm favourite in our families. That's probably the choice.
Well, I presume that might be this weekend, so enjoy. And no, thank you so much for participating in the podcast. I'm sure the listeners have found lots of interesting points. So thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you for your time, Sean. Take care.
Well, we reached the end, and I really hope you enjoyed that. And if you want any further information about our guests, then their LinkedIn profile and contact information can be found in the episode notes. I do have one more section, which is a request for your involvement. I created this following multiple members of our community suggesting I should do this. And so this is a community-driven platform that is curated to help you. So if you know of any alternative solutions within our industry or related to the ITAM industry, then I want to hear from you. Help me to interview those that you want to learn about. And finally, if there is any feedback, it's welcomed. I want you to help me to improve this podcast. The better this gets, the better the information you'll receive. So help me to ask the questions that are relevant to you so you get the right answers. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to like and subscribe. And again, please share with your colleagues and industry peers if you feel it's relevant. Thank you.